Arthur, somewhere in Europe. You are on with David and Matt. How are you?
Oh, hello. I'm glad to be on your show. Hello. How are you? So I want to somehow introduce a cliché conversation, if that's not a big deal. A general conversation, actually, if you don't mind.
We'll try.
It's actually a question about assumptions. Do you think it's wrong if someone would believe in something with having zero evidence for it? Do you think that that's a problem?
Generally, yes, but it would depend on what it is, because there are certain things that we can't necessarily have evidence for, but we have pragmatic reasons why we need to accept them. They're presuppositions.
Yeah. And I'm not entirely sure you can believe anything with zero evidence. There has to be some material basis inside of the brain to reach an assumption of any kind.
It'd just be bad evidence in some cases. Like, you know, you can say, hey, I believe my mom loves me, and the only, you know, oh, I don't have any evidence of this. Really? You don't have any evidence of that? Oh, okay, well, let me change it from my mom to something else. And you go down it. What David's essentially talking about is that, in my view, and he can correct me if I get this wrong, every belief that you hold, every time you are convinced that X is likely true, you have become convinced for some reason. And it could be good reasons, and it could be bad reason. And it's just like, you could consider that evidence. And what's happening is your standards of evidence are so low that you're being convinced by bad evidence or by incomplete evidence. But I don't know that, I'm not sure you could believe something in the absence of any evidence.
There's good research into this, and I will let the caller speak. I just want to add this. There is one of the fundamental studies in neuroscience was done by Blake, Moore, and Cooper in the 1970s. And I know this is going to be icky and creepy, but the 1970s science was icky and creepy. So just let's give them a pass on this. They raised a group of cats in an environment that had no horizontal lines, just like it was really meticulously put together. They were raised in this cylinder, and they had a cone on their head, and they spent the first basically month and a half of their lives in an environment with no horizontal lines. And then they introduced them into an environment that they would like play with them with a stick. And when it was vertical, they would follow it. When they turned it horizontal, it disappeared. It completely evaporated from reality altogether. They also would take a wall that was covered in vertical lines and push it toward them, and they would like back away from it. But if it had horizontal lines on it, it would go and go, and then eventually smash them in the face. But for their first like experiences with things that were horizontal, they did not see it at all. It did not exist at all in reality, because their brain had not been exposed to horizontal things, and it had not wired up appropriately to be able to predict it and also put it into context. Now, it didn't take very long for those cats to start to be able to make sense of the world with horizontal included. But it's an example of they had zero evidence that horizontal existed, and so therefore it did not appear to them until it did. So I don't think it's actually possible for a nervous system to make an assumption about anything with zero evidence. It's always going to come from some sort of prior experience that they've had with that thing, or some prior probability that's been built up over time by experience.
And one quick example is, somebody tells me their name is Pete. I have no evidence of this, but what the evidence that I'm going to use is that I've met lots of people, and people generally tend to tell me the name that they prefer to be referred to as. And so I have evidence from the surrounding world that we just kind of ignore. I'm actually doing a video about this week, but go ahead.
That was really good. That is a philosophical like conundrum that's good.
So would you say that generally as human species, is it good for humanity to assume things, or is it wrong? What do you think? Because I think
it's generally unwise for us to assume any more than is necessary to assume. For the things that anything that we can't demonstrate, there may be presuppositions like identity, non-contradiction, excluded middle. We can't prove logic without using logic. We can't disprove logic without using logic. And so those become presuppositions. But when you're talking about facts of reality that can be tested, that can have evidence for them, that don't require presupposition, then I would say, generally speaking, it's a mistake to accept those things without sufficient evidence.
And as long as you're making, I talk to scientists all the time, and we always will have it's like a safe word almost. We say, right now we're going to start speculating, which means, we're going to make some assumptions based off what we know, and we're going to make speculate on things we don't know. So as long as you're labeling what you're doing as, I am currently in an assumptive frame. I'm currently speculating. That's science itself. Science has to do that. And when you use the word, but I am interested, you say the word wrong, like, what do you mean by wrong?
For instance, say belief in a God. Is that wrong?
Well, what do you mean by wrong?
Well, a God doesn't exist. That would be the wrong on the statement.
Do you mean
that's different?
When you say wrong, and this is important, do you mean factually incorrect or morally incorrect?
Not morally.
Okay, so you just mean factually incorrect. Okay.
That's the thing, though, is that if the God proposition is unfalsifiable, then you can't use your definition of wrong. Because if somebody believes in a God and the God is unfalsifiable, there's no way to show that God doesn't exist, then they're not wrong, because in your sense of, they are now in contradiction with the fact or the actual state of affairs. And if that's the case and it's unfalsifiable, I would say that I would prefer using a different word, which is your belief warranted? Is it justified by evidence and argument, sort of thing? And if it's not, then the word I'd prefer is irrational, unreasonable, whatever, not wrong. Because wrong, if you're going to define wrong as they believe something that is not true, then for everything that you can't prove isn't true, you have to just kind of let them keep on going and say they're on good ground.
Yeah, wrong's a really charged word, because like if we were to move it to the discussion of, is there intelligent life out there other than human beings on another planet, right? We have a framework for trying to speculate about that. And so wrong is such a gigantic black and white 0 or 100 kind of term. I agree with Matt that it's better to use a different terminology, or at least really clarify what we mean. Is it more about how much confidence you have in that claim, and I don't really like the idea of blanketly saying something is right or wrong.
Yeah, it's tough to even get general, but continue, Arthur. I'm sorry.
No, that's all. That's all I wanted to ask, actually.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. Hopefully it was helpful, or at least sparked something interesting to
Thank you for being so
discuss.
polite too.